So welcome everybody to a look at the Marvel mystical side of comics. And that is sometimes a part of the Marvel world that we don't normally think about. As somebody that's a big DC guy, but a Marvel kind of on the fringy, it's always been that side that has kind of dragged me in. I just love the looks, I love the stories, I love the supernatural side of things, and we've got three creators here who are going to introduce themselves, and we are going to talk about some great characters: Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, all these characters that have just really turned out to be something a little more than they might have thought when they were created. So welcome everybody, and please introduce yourself.
Terry Kavanagh. I was a Marvel editor for a long time, and it was a long time ago, and I wrote Moon Knight amongst other titles for Marvel, but that's the one I'm here for right now.
Howard Mackie. I was a Marvel editor for exactly 7 years. I know how long. I'm not so old that I forgot. And I've written a bunch of stuff for Marvel, primarily known for Ghost Rider and Spider-Man.
Excellent. And I'm Dan Chichester, under the pretentious name of DG Chichester. Probably best known for Daredevil, but also some Dark Corners, the Midnight Suns with Howard. I was an editor on Marvel for a number of years, and Epic Comics, and Nightstalkers was the big title in the Midnight Suns run.
There's a lot of history up here, and that's awesome. So thank you guys for coming. There is a microphone over here, so this is your panel, and I will be asking questions until somebody comes up and asks them. And when I start getting to what's your favorite color, you need to start coming up to get questions up here. So if you have any questions, please don't be shy. But let's start this off. I want to go back to Moon Knight. Moon Knight was a character that when, in the 1970s, when I first heard of him, and that he was in a magazine that I couldn't buy because my parents wouldn't let me buy the magazines. It was just the comics. Moon Knight to me was always that character that I felt should just be like a dirtier Batman. Like, he was Batman, but he's doing the stuff that he shouldn't be doing. And I'm curious as to what were your thoughts of the character, because he's not anything like, anytime any writer takes him, he seems to go on some completely different direction. Like, we're going to really deal with the psychosis of the character. We're going to deal with his, with his past, things like that. So for you guys, what do you think it is about that character that makes him strong, or what you think he should be?
Well, for me, he was Marvel's Batman, and Batman was my favorite character, so that was a lot of fun for me. When I was writing the book, there was a mandate not to touch on the different psychotic personalities of his, and there was a request to move him into a more supernatural realm. He had sort of been introduced in Werewolf by Night, so he was of that branch of comics, that genre, but they had moved him away from that. So there was a request to move him more into that, which is why I created the Hellbent, which was supposed to be a species of underground species of people that were descended from both demons and angels. So they were both. Weren't really allowed to say angels at that point, because that implied a very specific religious heaven. But so that's how I sort of played it. I didn't want to just abandon how he had been played, but to move him into that supernatural thing. That's why I introduced the Hellbent.
I forgot until just now. I actually wrote Moon Knight. Sorry,
you wrote more than one? You wrote,
did I?
Right before I came on the book.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I am old.
How's that memory
These
going?
are so much fun when you do these things. Wait, I did that? I don't remember that.
I think you wrote it for like a year.
No, I definitely did not.
You wrote a number of issues.
We can Google this after. But what happened?
Have to.
Did you get paid for those issues?
Trust me. I always made sure I got paid. I may not remember many things. But
I had to pick up your dangling plot threads.
I beg your pardon. Keep your hands off my dangling plot threads.
I had to pick them up.
But I came in. I was asked to do at least one issue right after J.M. DeMatteis did his run, and he did a wonderful story. But as is Marc's bent, he tends to go in a certain direction. And there was a lot more, rather than mysticism, there was more spirituality, and Moon Knight getting to a point where he thought he didn't want to be too violent anymore. He wanted to become a passive spirit of vengeance. And he was only going to use Aikido to, he wasn't going to punch anybody and all that. Anyway, the editor came to me and said, Howard, we have a big issue coming up. It's issue 25. Will you write it? And I said, well, I've been reading what Marc did, and it's really not my strong suit. So he said, nope, doesn't matter. You just do. So essentially, my issue number 25 said to Marc's very nice run, nah, never mind. And so my approach was much more. I thought of him, as you suggested, more of Marvel's Batman. It's very much there. Yeah. All of the Batman stuff. I guess you bring a little Ra's al Ghul in would have been cool too. But anyway, did you ever do anything?
I never wrote the character, but enjoyed what these guys did. So there's my contribution to this conversation.
Thank you.
And when we look at Moon Knight, I was excited about when they put the series out. They did a really good series. Did you guys watch that, enjoy that? And I thought, because when you're reading the comics, sometimes you can get lost in the 45,000 different personalities that Marc Spector has. And sometimes you're reading, and I read for enjoyment. I read to get entertained, and all of a sudden I'm reading something, and I'm like, wait a minute, I forgot which personality he is in right now. Why is he driving a cab? I don't know what's going on. I think with the show, they did such a great job with it that I think it really helped visualize the psychosis and then kind of make you understand a little bit more, because I went back and started reading things going, I get it a little bit better now. And what were your thoughts of the show?
I loved the series. I really did. I thought the visual depiction of Moon Knight was great. I thought Isaac, I can't remember the actor's name.
F. Murray Abraham.
Yeah, I think he did.
Something like that.
I think he did a great job, and I think they were really smart to go back to the split personality aspects of it, because that's what really made Moon Knight different from other characters. Yeah. I mean, he was crazy. And if you break it down, all superheroes are a little crazy. That's a sort of crazy thing to do, to dress up in spandex and go to the worst neighborhoods at night and punch people. Well, not for you.
Or
maybe.
Cosplay.
Maybe not for you, but...
So what about for Moon Knight for you guys? Did you watch the series? And
I have not seen
it. Yeah, I agree with Terry. It was phenomenally well done. I mean, it was just, you guys all saw it, right? It's a little dicey on some of the special effects, but the psychosis, the split personality, the questioning himself, I think made you also question some things with the audience. So really spot on.
And the thing with Moon Knight too is I think he was more fascinating as a character in the 70s because this was sort of an unknown thing. Like, people didn't talk about feelings and emotions back then. And I remember reading this going, this guy's weird. He's all like different things going on, and he's hearing voices. And then as we've gotten older, our sphere of influences have grown. We get to know more people. We start realizing that we know more people that are like that than not like that. And do you think maybe Moon Knight, it's like more of a, I don't want to say a champion of the people today, but do you think that this might be, he's something that is more represented now than maybe back then? Or understood better, I should say.
Well, mental health is certainly more of an issue, and it's more on the table. So yeah, I do think, yes. You?
I don't know. I like when he hits people.
It's an opportunity, right? I mean, when you've got a character that has literally multi-dimensions to him, I think as creators, you get a chance to play with a lot more than just, I must avenge this. You've got all those different levels to play with, and probably as readers, you get the same level of enjoyment where you get to open it up and not really knowing what's going to happen next. And that's maybe more exciting than, okay, I exactly know where this is going to go. Even Marc's run, like you were saying, might have been more spiritual in some ways. That's the opportunity with a character like that. A lot harder lift with other things to kind of explore.
I was disappointed that I wasn't really allowed to touch on.
Yeah, I would think. I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah,
that you were kind of told.
You didn't touch on it in your one issue.
I'm Googling
it. And when you think about those characters, the ones that are on the supernatural side, they were always on the fringe side of the Marvel world. Like when I think of Ghost Rider, I never saw very many ads for Ghost Rider.
I know.
I never saw.
You wrote a couple of issues.
Multitask.
Oh, we took your phone away?
Thanks,
I have
Dad.
to do that a lot. I have to do that.
I didn't know anything about Ghost Rider because there were never any ads for him. You never saw a lot about it. And, you think about back in the old days, in the 70s, when I was a young reader, I didn't discover Ghost Rider until I went to 7-Eleven and bought a Slurpee cup that had Ghost Rider on it. And I got that cup. That's how I discovered Howard the Duck. I was like, what are these things?
There was a Ghost Rider Slurpee cup?
Yeah.
Is that what they called you? Howard the Duck? Oh, no, it's a different.
I get that a lot.
Did you get any money for that Slurpee cup?
No, he said this was in the...
This is the 70s.
Oh, seven.
Yes.
Yeah, the original.
Yeah. So you had all these things, and for me, that's how I discovered them. And when you look at somebody like Ghost Rider, what a look. That is that is one of the most iconic looks you can imagine. And whatever your thoughts of the Ghost Rider movie that came out, or the two, it's the look. I mean, that movie could be so horrible, and I'm not going to make any opinions here or there, but all of a sudden, if you're watching the movie, you're like, oh, this is not, oh my God, that's Flaming Skull, and look at the chains. It brings it right out. So as far as the visuals of Ghost Rider, or, writing him or drawing, or any of those things that you were involved in with the character, what was it that you think made it so magical?
Well, yes, it was obviously, I was a Ghost Rider fan before I got the assignment. And ironically, given the beginning of this discussion, I basically took over Ghost Rider after Marc DeMatteis finished his run. And I was a huge fan of his run using Johnny Blaze. And I was certainly attracted to the visuals to begin with. And I agree with you. I think it's one of the best visuals for a character in the Marvel Universe. I may be somewhat prejudiced about that.
It's fine.
But yeah, I mean, I like yesterday, a young man came to my table and he had said he had never read Ghost Rider, but he had collected the comics because he thought it looked really cool. Wow. And then recently he decided to read the comics, and those are really good stories. I said, thank you. But it is that. I mean, I think the hook with Ghost Rider is the Flaming Skull demon riding a motorcycle. I mean, it's right there.
Weren't Skulls and Flames two of Julie Schwartz's cover things that if you put a skull or flames on the covers, and a gorilla?
He was always a gorilla. It was a gorilla, a question mark to make you go, what am I supposed to be reading?
And I thought Skulls and Flames, not necessarily together, were part of it.
Well, I mean, I think
Gorilla Skull.
As you know, when the Midnight Suns was born because after Ghost Rider came out, or the second run that I did came out, he became very popular and was a bit of a sales sensation. And then the character, the Flaming Skull, appeared on the cover of just about every comic Marvel did at that point. And it did. It boosted sales and everything. And that eventually led to our experience
In the Midnight
Suns.
Right. And calling that the dark side of the Marvel Universe. In many ways. You look like you have a question there, and you're eagerly anticipating getting to the microphone.
My first experience was coming to a comic book shop and seeing cover 15, Texera, Glowing Skull, and I was a horror fan, and so Ghost Rider is the reason I became a comic nerd.
I'm sorry.
30-some years ago, and I love you. But you were saying that you'd based it off of, you've been reading the Johnny Blaze before.
Yeah.
But Dan Ketch seemed to be perfect for me. It had a different, I'm not sure if I'd started with Johnny Blaze, it'd go the same way. But then you guys did the Amazing Spirits events, which you were also obviously with the Midnight Suns, my first ever comic book event.
Wow,
type of
that's
thing.
amazing.
So I'd had a harder work ethic. I worked next to the comic book shop, like a mall away. And so I'd be like, I got to put in extra shifts because I have to buy all these books because I got to keep up with what's going on. And it was so amazing back then. But how did you have all of that planned from the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. Every step of the way, that's the way it works.
He's sarcastic, and I'm snarky.
He said that with such a straight face.
You asked, not always, but in this case, that is a good story. I mean, we knew nothing of what we were going to do.
No.
We knew we were going to build a dark side of the Marvel Universe based off of Ghost Rider. And they were flush with cash at that point, and they put us up for 2 or 3 days in a convention center. Me, Howard, Chris Cooper, Len Kaminsky. Is that it? Is that all of us?
Bobby.
Bobby, obviously Bobby. Bobby Chase, the editor. And we literally mapped out this whole thing from there. We knew the characters that they were going to be. We knew it was going to be Morbius, it was going to be Ghost Rider, the characters of the Nightstalkers. Chris had the Darkhold idea. We had no idea how they connected together. And so it was 2 days of very intense going back and forth and these moments of epiphany of like, wait a minute, that'll work. And I had a stack of occult books about this high that we would refer to, and then Len would go and do a ritual every now and again and would come back with an amazing solution to something. And we did actually walk away from that feeling like we actually had
and I was
a story.
100% behind it from
he was the worst cheerleader on the planet. He hated it until about midway through. You started.
Well, no, I mean, I was, as I've explained to Dan, I went into that meeting feeling petulant at best, because
his hair was dark before he went into that meeting.
Yes, when I launched, when they came to me to do Ghost Rider, and I really wanted to write Blaze, quite frankly, and I was told I couldn't. They wanted a new character, so I created Dan Ketch, who was basically me. I mean, there's very little originality there. Dan Ketch was me. Including the cemetery, where I hung out in that cemetery.
Awesome.
But nobody expected the series to succeed when we started. As a matter of fact, sales tried to kill it because, well, and in their defense, it was a previously failed character written by a relatively unknown writer, myself, and with 2 unknown artists, and really, they tried to kill it. And then it became successful, and he was appearing all over the place. And suddenly they said, so now we're going to do this new series, or this imprint.
Line, family.
Yes, and you're going to have to play with everybody else. Up until that point, I just did my own thing. And I came in not in a good mood to this meeting because I really didn't want to do it. And I knew everybody and I was friends with everybody, but I had such a distinct memory of the visual, and I've described this to you.
And I always forget that, but yes, it's true.
We were in a conference room, and there was a bank of windows with radiators underneath with radiator covers, and everybody was sitting around the table except for me. I was on the radiator covers, staring out the window as everybody is trying to come up with ideas.
What a baby.
Oh, absolutely. This is not a proud moment I'm talking about. And then Dan came up, you mentioned, well, we could do something with Lilith, the first
original wife of
Adam. And I was aware of that, and it was like a light bulb moment for me. And I spun my head around, and I said, wait, what? And all of a sudden, I went from being the petulant little child that I was, and I moved to the table, and that's when we really started.
He said that was like a half-baked, maybe possibly good idea. I don't want Dan to take credit for it. So he quickly moved, pushed me aside, then erased when I had written Lilith on the board, and he wrote Lilith on the board. So that...
No, well, that's why I'm saying in a public forum, it was you that provided the key
to get you off the radiator.
Get me off the radiator.
Not necessarily a good line of books, but to get him off the radiator.
And I was very pleased. Plus, as a result of that, I mean, kind of the, they tried to assuage me by allowing me to do Spirits of Vengeance as well, which meant I got to focus on Blaze, which is what I had wanted to do in the first place.
You had some really fun, happy banter in that. That was wonderful. I went back, I just reread the entire thing before I came here, and so I'm like, awesome. You got the spread of comics everywhere, so I'm like, okay, but then I have to look over here because I'm this one, and, well, I know it continues on in this, but I have to.
Well, thank you.
Yes, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
By that point, were you guys able to touch on angels and any kind of...
We were touching on anything we wanted. Nobody seemed to be like policing us. We were like talking about ritualistic, innards and bizarro,
What do we call it?
Well, no, there didn't seem to be any restrictions about horror or anything like that, but and even demons were okay. I mean, we had Son of Satan as a comic book around before that, but I just remember that angels were off limits even when I was doing Marvel Comics Presents.
Could that have come from your editor versus
No, that came
ESC?
from Mark Grunwald.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I don't remember us having a lot of restrictions. As a matter of fact, and I've told you this story too, years later, probably about 10 years ago, I got contacted by a
That's right.
a college professor who was a rabbi, and he taught religious studies. And he was doing a white paper with his son, and it was about the use of Hebraic lore in popular culture, specifically comic books. And he wanted to talk to me about Lilith. And I think I had recommended that he talk to you as well. But he said, so how did you guys know all of this stuff? Where did you were so close to the Sumerian or whatever Aramaic or Babylonian.
So close to opening the Book of the Dead.
Yes.
You almost conjured demons on Earth.
He said, and there was really only one text at the time that went into the detail that you guys touched upon. And, but it was, nobody had it. It was just college level stuff for scholars. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. We're comic book writers. I said, all we know is a little bit of a lot of things. And then I said, so anything you think we did intentionally, we made up. And he said, absolutely impossible. You could not have made this stuff. And he started, I said, Rabbi, I'm telling you, this is really what we did, and he just could not believe it. That's why I think I recommended. I said, I'm sure Dan had some book there, and we had all spoken. It was horror and the occult were things that we were all somewhat interested in. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been doing what we were doing. But I said, no, it was just little bits and pieces from all over the place that we turned into something else. And absolutely impossible.
And again, please, the microphone is open. If anybody has any questions, please come over and don't feel shy, because that's why we're all here. We're here to find out more and to pick the brains of the creators of these events and these worlds. And one thing that I remember, Marvel, and I cannot remember the year, I'm going to say it was probably 1997, 98, there was a 4-issue series called The Supernaturals. And I don't know if you guys remembered that one at all, but it almost, and the thing that I loved about, there we go, we'll let you look that one up. But one of the cool things about it was like a lot of the fringe guys, like Voodoo, the Voodoo
Brother
Master,
Voodoo.
and it had Son of Satan in it. And the way they prefaced it was, they talked about a thing called the Chaos Event. And you didn't know anything about it. Like, all the superheroes were gone, and it was the mystical characters that had to kind of take over and try to set the world right and get everybody back. And you guys don't know anything about that, so I guess we're just going to move on to another
We
question.
forgot about that because the Chaos Event closed.
Right.
No, it
Was
wasn't.
one of the Max ones that was done under Quesada?
It wasn't a Max, and the interesting thing too was that each issue came with a mask. So you had like a cardboard mask where you could cut out the eyes, and you could be,
Wow,
It's a pretty cool giveaway.
It sounds like a good concept.
It was great. It was good. So
sounds like the time when Marvel was publishing too much.
this I think was almost at the time when they were cutting back, but they were like, okay, let's dip our foot into this side of it. When you talk about these characters, I think a lot of the things that I love about team-ups and, having groups of characters together is not the fact that they get to go fight crime together and save the world, but you have to have these dynamics that all have to get along. And when you think about characters like Moon Knight, who's an absolute loner, yet he's 25 different people, and you've got Ghost Rider is tormented, and all these characters, teaming them up to always seem to be just like the right thing to do. And as far as anything now, what would you like to see as far as maybe a supernatural side team up, as far as characters that were in there, and maybe some storylines? And I'm not asking for like these huge pitches, but in your head, have you always had like, this is kind of the story I'd like to tell?
I mean, I don't know that I have a particular story, but I mean, I think the supernatural characters in Marvel are really interesting. You know, they play with classics. They've got some really original characters as well. I think it's a tricky balance, you know, creating with some things. I mean, I've always maintained, I felt the mistake we made with the Midnight Suns stuff ultimately was it went too dark. We sort of indulged our worst tendencies to really dark things. The trick, I think, in playing within a larger shared universe, like a Marvel, even with supernatural characters, is to make sure that you continue to bring the relatability back. You know, it's really easy to kind of go down this grisly path, which could be really interesting if you're just writing a pure play Clive Barker, you know, Stephen King type of thing, but you have to find that relatability, you know, back to it. So
and usually you do that through normal humans interacting within there. I mean, that's what the Tomb of Dracula stuff by Marv and Gene Colan way back when were brilliant because it was really just around the people around Dracula.
And that was really, when I launched Ghost Rider, I never thought of it as a supernatural book. It was, I always considered Ghost Rider to be a character that existed on the very dark edges of the Marvel Universe. And that's why in the first year, he was going up against superpowered characters. He was going up against mutants and all that. And I always felt it was important that he be the primary supernatural element in the book. And to your point, as much as I've reread some of Midnight Suns stuff, and I've enjoyed it, including my own stuff, which I never say that I've enjoyed, but that is the problem with it, is we fell into all supernatural all the time. And I think it was probably easier for you and I to kind of walk that edge with our particular set of characters than something like Darkhold, which
that's the whole
that's
point.
it. It is a supernatural book, and I think that was a mistake. But like I said, there was a lot of fun that I had while doing it.
But I think, Terry, your point, in any sort of new book or new idea using characters like that, they might the book would almost benefit from those characters being the touch points for some other human characters, like the Tomb of Dracula, versus making the book purely about Blade,
You have to have someone for the audience to identify with.
Right.
And like you were saying about going too dark, I tend to think, when I think too dark, I think of the DC cinematic universe. That it seemed like once they made some dark movies, everybody was going to be dark. Even Superman. The Superman movies have been very dark. And to me, Batman should be dark. It should be a dark movie because that's the character. Superman should be the light in the dark. If you're going to make a dark movie, you can't make the character dark. He has to be the light that sort of does it. And it was really interesting when you said that, because you don't, to me, it seems like in a lot of things, it's either all or nothing. Like, we're going to make the whole Marvel universe dark. No, just have that little pocket. I mean, as a kid reader, I could always separate those things. It might have been easier back then, but it was like, okay, here's Ghost Rider. He lives here. He's fighting this big eye. Was that the orb? The orb. And I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I ever saw, but oh my God, this thing is carrying.
Not in my Ghost Rider.
I remember.
I did it in Solo Avengers. It was Orb versus Hawkeye.
And it was stuff like you could separate it. They all had their own little world. And if like Ghost Rider drove through New York and saw Spider-Man, to me, it's like, okay, well, there they are. They're kind of together. But it wasn't, the dark didn't get dragged in.
And it's about the contrasts, and that's the problem, is that there's nothing unique when you have Ghost Rider going to hell and fighting a bunch of demons. Then it's it's the equivalent of, Ant-Man fighting a bunch of miniature aliens.
Yeah.
And he's just a guy fighting a bunch of other guys. And I think and that's something that I feel has gotten, Marvel sometimes has lost sight of, quite frankly, is that I actually have not read a lot of, my policy is I don't read a character after I'm done writing it, because I don't ever want to be able to specifically criticize it. So I will just genuinely
you could sometimes compliment it.
You could, if you liked it. That would be the key.
Well, it would have to be compliment.
It would have to be written by you.
Well, yeah. But
How's that new Ghost Rider series? It's pretty good. Right?
I don't know. I haven't read it. But I just think it's the contrast that is important. And that's, again, when we went so deep down the, Lilith was a cool character, and a bunch of the other, her Lilin were as well.
Right, but that allowed you to kind of dive deeper.
Yes. Yep.
You're back.
I'm back. Nobody else was here, so I figured I had a couple
The microphone is yours.
Great.
All right. So you were talking about being so spot on with the research of Lilith that you just made up entirely, which was great.
No, I did have some pretty dark books in Old Defense.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
You guys can be as dark as you want to be. But what is it like now? Because when this was the first other experience that I had with the comic that was terrible, this was terrible, your comic was great, but I took in a copy of one of the Darkholds to one of my instructors in school to be like, what is this Latin? Can you translate this for me? Because we didn't have the internet at that point. And so he pulls out a pen and starts writing across the comic, exactly translating things from the pages of the Darkhold. I'm like, okay, I'll just buy that again then. But how much do you guys think it has helped to change going from like, God, I have to go and look in these encyclopedias and I have to run over here and do all this, to where suddenly we have the internet now, and I mean, you have to fact check. But has it been a big change in how you write things? Has it made things a lot easier?
Absolutely. I find, it saves the bank account, right? You don't have to let go and find these fringe books and buy them that much. I think you can validate stuff quicker, at least for myself. I find, I want to explore an idea, look up something around it, dive deeper on it, and I can sometimes find out that's not a path worth going down. But it's actually allowed me now, I think, to equalize, because I can get more information, I can then dismiss more. Sometimes I felt like I'd spent so much time researching one particular thing that I absolutely had to use it. Like I put all the time in, I've got to bring in this fringe thing here, but it's actually a distraction of the story. So now I find if I get it all, I can pick and choose a lot easier.
I think sometimes it can curb your creativity a little bit as well. There are some writers, I don't want to name them, I'm not sure I could, that I find, nobody here, that I find they're not doing particularly creative comic books. They're just taking little historic moments and then turning those into stories. And they're expanding on that and adding something fantastical to it, but they're not really generating it from themselves, which is okay. You can do that sometimes. I've certainly done that, but there's a couple of writers I've noticed that's all they seem to do. So
I prefer the old days when we could just make stuff up.
Right.
And that speaks to your point, because I do go down those rabbit holes of, doing too much research online. And part of it is you have to do it a little bit more now, because you all have the same access to the research that we do. So we want to make sure we get as close to it as possible. But I think there's a point at which you just have to, get creative with it. Whereas back in the old days, like I said, we could make stuff up and nobody really knew whether we knew it or not. And you had some of the, more of the weird books than I did. So hopefully you were fact checking some of our stuff. What was it that we call when Lilith, scrying, right?
Yes,
the Leviathan.
Reading the entrails.
The guts and,
Len was particularly taken with that.
That was really cool. Yeah. I think that was your idea as well. So sure.
Now, before you sit down, do you got any more? Because this is obviously is a huge panel for you. So please ask away.
I'm going insane with this panel, but I want to.
They're making no sense. What are they talking about?
The questions that I was kind of like,
Uh-oh, somebody's getting up. They'll leave. I thought they're going to have to ask a question. That's okay.
But you come back. You come back if you have anything else.
I'll get my steps in.
Nope, you may have a question covered.
Oh, the long walk. Hello.
And please, anybody, if you have to go to the mic, don't take the long, just cut right across.
My question is more of a writing question. One of the things I find is that sometimes I struggle with character intention. So I come up with a really good idea, but then the character intention gets sort of blurry. How do you keep the character intention and integrity over time? I know it's a loaded question.
Are you talking about like a character you've created, like something new, or just any character that you might want to be working with?
Characters in general.
I always find that if you've invested yourself to a certain degree with a character, if you've done it, you're going to struggle with plot points, you're going to struggle with like certain things that way, but if you find you're fighting the character, like you're trying to insert words in her or his mouth and push them into certain ways, you know you're going in the wrong direction. You know, very often in the best things I think are okay, you know, it will be that you're being led by them more and they start to kind of write themselves. So I think it's kind of a flow state as a writer that you get into, especially if you spent a little bit of time with something in that regard.
Great.
I agree, especially with continued character storytelling like we do. I sort of start from character intention and then look for story to attach to that, not the other way around.
And I mean, the advantage we had with working with established characters is much of that has been handed to us over years of continuity. So, and slightly different. Now, I got to work with both Peter Parker, who had a long history, and then Dan Ketch, who did not. But in both cases, what I was always looking for was commonality between myself and the characters. And, you know, and quite frankly, what would my intention then be there? Now, it's obviously, you know, on rare occasions does my head burst into flames, my skin melt off, but
you like to crouch on rooftops in the rain a lot.
I do indeed, yes.
I mean, everyone likes to do that every once in a while.
Come on. But no, it's about finding, you know, for me, it's about finding commonality with the character. And it's, you know, sometimes the characters are, quite frankly, too much like me. And yeah, I have to step back. And then, you know, beyond intention, it's, you know, they start, and because I've spoken to you about this, where at one point early on my career, I was doing Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, and I was doing a Havoc series for you from Marvel Comics Presents. And at one point I got all 3 copies, and I did one on rare occasion, started reading them all, and I went, oh my God, all 3 characters sound exactly alike. And that's when I realized I had to back off a little bit and work on my developing my writing skills a little bit more to figure some of this stuff out.
I had the opposite problem. I turned in a Daredevil plot once, and Ralph Macchio, the editor, called me up and said, "This isn't Hellraiser. Go back and redo it." So, so I got a little confused on intention and motivation there. So, do you find these things you're already thinking about, or is this helpful to you?
I have some pieces that I've been working on. I do fiction writing, so I have some good plots, but I find I struggle with villains. They tend to have problems with intention, so I have trouble deciding the direction they should go in. So that's the thing that I keep running into. Believe
in the villain as much as you believe in the hero. I mean, but that's not. I know it's not an epiphany, right? Boom. But I mean, no, it's true. I mean, if you believe in the hero, and that's, you know, your jam at the moment. But if you take the role of the villain as much, then, you know, they become a joy to sort of work through their situations, and then they're not a plot device. Their intention becomes clear to you because you've role played. And find something positive in their villainous intent, quite frankly, because they don't. Your villains should never think of themselves as, you know, villains.
Right.
You know what they're doing should their intent should be positive to them. Now the means are more often than not where the villainy comes in.
Yeah, as we always say, Dr. Doom doesn't wake up in the morning and say, "What evil thing can I do today?" He thinks the world would be better off if he were running it. There'd be less starvation, less war, less turmoil in general, and that's a motivating factor.
Oddly enough, I do wake up every morning. I say, "What evil thing can I do today?"
Sometimes I even get an email to that effect from him.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely.
Hi, I just have a couple of questions. First off, did the whole Midnight Sun saga end the way you wanted it to, or did it kind of fizzle out with all the craziness at Marvel at the time?
Well, I got fired off the book, so it didn't end the way I wanted. But
Oh, wine.
I mean, up to that point, I know it continued on, but I mean, I thought it was getting a little busy and a little messy. You and I talked about this, in side conversations, for some of the reasons we said. And I think it was starting to get in that insular way, which if I had continued on it.
What was the issues? Was it more editorial? Was it sales? I know that was a crazy time at Marvel where they were publishing almost 500 books maybe or something like that.
I don't feel it was editorial. I mean, certainly there was a mandate to have a crossover a year or something like that, but we still had, I think, a lot of flexibility to make it work. But I think we were still positioned, in this world that was getting darker as opposed to this world that was maybe exploring things in a different way.
And I think it spoke to a forced connection between some of the books.
Yeah.
As we said, where thanks to Dan, we came up with the Lilith idea, and I think that was a really good, start out of the gate. But then we realized some of these characters just didn't have anything to do with one another.
I mean, this was a weird editorial mandate. I don't even know the exact reasons behind this, but one thing that's come up over the years is the Midnight Suns were the supernatural arm of the Marvel Universe, right? We couldn't use Doctor Strange, right? There's like one scene, I think, toward the end of, might have been the first Nightstalkers or something like that, where he sort of shows up as a character, but then it became this, you can't play with him.
What was the logic behind that?
Whoever had him, Ralph or somebody at that point, didn't want him to play in this space.
Did he even have his own book at that point?
I don't know, but that was a weird thing. Why, if you're having this huge supernatural event, why don't you have the Sorcerer Supreme being a big part of it?
Right. My other question is, do you ever get proud of seeing your stuff in some of the stuff you've done in other mediums? Like I'm thinking, I remember seeing Ghost Rider in the Fantastic Four cartoon, and I remember recently this video game called Midnight Sun, spelled S-U-N.
Yeah, that was a way not to pay us any money.
But it has Lilith as a main character, and I was just wondering if you guys watch that and feel a little proud or
I don't know. Pride seems a little strong because sometimes it is. It's about, oh, look, they're using my character and not paying me any any residuals for that. But I watched the Hellstrom TV series. I don't know if anyone saw.
I saw it.
You saw the whole thing, and you saw who the villain would have been.
Oh, I didn't watch the whole thing, no. No.
Well, if you got to the end, there's a little kid, and if there was a second season, it would have been Lilith.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was kind of cool for me, and they used a different version of Caretaker.
Did they thank us in the credits?
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, no. So, yeah, it's a complicated mix. Yes, sometimes you see things, and yeah, it's kind of cool. I was not a big fan of the Ghost Rider movies, quite frankly, even though, they used Johnny Blaze, but it was the Dan Ketch version Ghost Rider design. I felt like there were some good elements to the movie that they could have used an editor or a consulting writer. But yeah, so it is complicated. It's a complicated experience when you've been working for corporate publishing to see the usage of the characters in other media.
I really enjoyed seeing the Scarlet Spider in the new Spider-Verse movie, even though
I haven't seen it yet.
and you're never going to see it. So, even though they made fun of him, really, they were making fun of what we were doing in the 90s in general and the approach to comics then. I enjoyed it nonetheless. I don't know about Pride, Howard's right, because it would have to be an almost direct translation of what we did with a character to feel that. And it never is. It's never that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we
Nice
see
shirt.
we see the shirt, so we know it's going to be a good question.
I know these questions are.
It's definitely a Ghost Rider question. How much flack from the other writers or creative people did you do when you did bring Blaze back and made them brothers?
Yeah, if I got flack, I didn't listen. it was, no, I mean, I don't know that there would have been, are you talking about from the other Midnight Suns writers or?
Or just anybody at Marvel in general, like you guys were going down this path, you brought Blaze back, and then all of a sudden they're brothers, and it's like, bang, Dallas, Bobby woke up.
Honestly, I hopefully everybody has a similar approach that I do, which is, again, when I'm done with a character, it's up to the next writer to do. I mean, a lot of things from my understanding happened to Ghost Rider even right after I left. Didn't read the stories because not my character, quite frankly. Even Danny Ketch, who I did co-create, he's still not mine. I know what the deal is when you do that stuff. So that's part of the reason why I don't read the character after I left, but I didn't really get any, because quite frankly, I mean, look, it's comic books. Everything is undoable, including death.
Or brothers.
Right, exactly. Or Mark DeMatteis turning Moon Knight into a pacifist and me coming on there going, nah. So, no, I didn't really get much flack.
Okay.
Also, the great thing was back then, this thing, the series of tubes that runs under the earth and connects everybody called the internet, didn't exist. So, if somebody really hated that, even including Fandom, they had to actually take the time and write out a missive and put it in an envelope and seal the envelope and get a stamp and find the address and send it in.
And then you were never going to read it anyway.
Oh, no, God.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Sure.
And by the time they found a stamp, they were already not angry
Exactly.
anymore. The next issue came out and cleaned it all up. So I know that we're kind of at the end of our time, and before we finish and, we can let everybody know where you guys are the rest of the weekend and where you're sitting so they can come visit if they have any more questions. What are some of the characters, or is there any particular character that you want to work with or really can say, you know what, I fulfilled the dream of writing or drawing this character, being a part of this character, maybe not necessarily being like proud of how it began and ended, but did you go in with a character that you loved and got to write, draw, edit, do whatever you needed to do, be a part of that life, and if not, which character is it?
I really always wanted to try Moon Knight, and so I was really happy to get that opportunity. I was able to do different things with the character. I was, as I said earlier, disappointed that I couldn't touch on the mental health issues because I thought that's really where the meat of the character's story would be. But I love being able to play in that sandbox.
And I got to do Ghost Rider. I was a huge fan of Ghost Rider. I had a nice long run, which perhaps when I first did it went on a little bit too long. I think I should have stepped away a year or two earlier, quite frankly. And now I'm revisiting Ghost Rider right now in a mini-series with, completely new eyes. And, I, quite frankly, just because it's been almost 30 years, I'm a totally different writer than I was then. But then I also got to do Spider-Man, which was a lifelong dream. I got to write one small Batman story. But then my time at Marvel, because of the long run I had on Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, and then the number of stories Terry had me do in the Marvel Comics Presents book, I got to touch upon just about every character in the Marvel Universe. So, I've written Daredevil stories and Doctor Strange stories, and, Cap and Iron Man and all that. So, I mean, I count myself very, very fortunate as a recovering comic geek to be able to experience all of those characters.
Good thing you're a writer.
Yeah, thank God. I need two editors to help me.
And actually, to what Howard said, as the editor of Marvel Comics Presents for 5 years, which was for stories per issue, twice a month. I got any character I ever had any interest in the Marvel Universe, I commissioned stories for.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun for me. I don't think there's a character out there I didn't touch that I wanted to. That sounds creepy.
Oh, yeah.
When I say that.
Dark side of the Marvel Universe, you know. I knew we'd get around to that.
But I had their permission, so it's okay.
Good stuff. Oh, I guess my answer. You know, like Howard, like Terry, I had a chance to play with a lot of characters. And in the theme of our dark side, there was a character I worked on called Terror Incorporated, which was sort of like a boogeyman assassin, which is probably the closest personification of my personality, at least according to Carl Potts. It would be fun to kind of go back and play with that character again in one capacity. I think we had a good run of it. It was a short run, but it was always one that was kind of fun to play with, and that would be something that would be cool to go back to.
It was funny you mentioned JMD Mateus and following him up and things. And I got to interview him when I was doing a comic podcast years ago. I got to interview him, and we were talking about writing and my favorite story. And this guy was like so just down to earth and chill. And I said, and he goes, I was telling him, because I'm a huge war comics guy and I loved weird war tales. So you're talking about flaming skulls. That was every cover. It was a skeleton in a German uniform. It was an American, whatever one it was, there was a skeleton. And he was always kind of the good guy on the cover, which was weird because he was doing it was just a weird thing. But we talked about, as a kid, I used to love I would read Weird War Tales, I would read House of Mystery or Time Warp, and then I would read any of these anthology books. And he said, I got to tell you a really funny story about how I ripped off DC for paying me for the same story. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to hear this one. So he said, I wrote a Weird War Tales story, and it's Weird War Tales number 71. This is how bad I am with comics, where they found a floating PT boat. And they picked him up, and they picked up the survivor. It was the only officer that was left. And in 5 stories, he became a vampire and killed the entire crew. That was the end of the story. And then he goes, did you read Time Warp? And I go, I love Time Warp. And he goes, well, issue number 5 has a spaceship that is derelict floating in space. And another ship came up and got in there. And guess what the guy was inside there? I'm like, vampire? And he goes, yep, killed the whole crew. And he goes, and then I wrote I think it was for House of Mystery. It was like a straight-on vampire story. Like, oh yeah, this was an easy one. They bought a house, the vampire was in there, and he killed the whole family. But it's those funny stories like that where you know, and the creative side of things. And I was laughing so hard at that because, again, I had every single one of those issues. I think I even brought him to have him sign. It's those things that make me just love comic books. And when you get to talk to the creators and know those little stories, like you guys talking about sitting around a room and throwing ideas around, those are the things that I love to hear. And I'm pretty sure everybody else likes to know that there was some heart and love and soul and maybe some stealing behind the scenes of our favorite comic book characters. So as we wind down, where are you guys sitting out in Artist Alley so people can come find you and talk more?
Howard, me, Dan, next to each other, literally, row K. Yes.
Row K.
I'm K4, so you 3 and
something like that.
Yeah.
We don't do math, but yes, we're K, right? K right in the middle.
Yeah.
Or just follow the ray of sunshine and wonder and happiness.
Sure.
Exactly. Look for the unicorns.
Who is that?
Rainbows.
So thank you guys very much. Thank everybody for being here. Round of applause for our guests. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of the show.
That video was delicious. And good for you, too. I know, I'm a doctor. And I'm also poor, which is hellaciously funny because you'll never see a poor doctor. Trust me and subscribe already. Have fun and eat another video.